Hey everybody, AZ Plant Reviews here, and today I wanted to talk about the most iconic and perhaps the most obvious plant that I could talk about on this channel, and that is the saguaro, the giant saguaro. The saguaro is the symbol of the Sonoran Desert, and in fact, it defines the range of the Sonoran Desert. That's right, there's a lot of other identifying plants of the Sonoran Desert, but this is obviously the biggest and most obvious one to point out when determining the ecological range that we call the Sonoran Desert. Things like the creosote and stuff also exist in the Sonoran Desert, but they're also found in the Mojave and Chihuahua deserts, so they don't specifically define the Sonoran Desert, but the saguaro does. Something about the ecological conditions of the Sonoran Desert allows the saguaro to grow in just that situation and none other. So the saguaro is an amazing plant. It is an ancient plant. It is an extremely old plant. They can live for hundreds of years. This one that's in the clip right now is certainly at least 150 years old. You hear the myth about them growing their first arms after 70, 75 years, and that's pretty much true. There's some exceptions. Sometimes it can happen earlier, but for the most part, that is true. They are beautiful. They can grow up to like 100 feet tall, though usually you find them between 30 and 50 feet tall. And as you can see here, they also have a rare mutated form, which is called the Crested saguaro, and it's basically like a cancer. It's like a tumor, a genetic deformation on the saguaro. It kind of messes up all of its future upward growth. It can still grow new arms after that, and those arms can be normal. But you can see this one right here is a fully crested saguaro, and it's just going to keep on growing those weird mutated crested bits like that. But they're actually prized. Like, if you try to buy a crested saguaro specifically, it's going to cost you like 10 times more than a normal saguaro, because these kind of saguaros only appear about 1 in every 10,000 saguaros. So it's a pretty rare sight, and most people who live in the Sonoran Desert in the Phoenix area have probably seen one or several, but just know that, like, statistically it's enough of a rarity that it makes them really expensive and really prized, though, I don't know if it's, like, worth buying one per se. They're beautiful out in nature, and it's not really going to get any further upward growth unless it makes new arms. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, the saguaro is an amazing plant. Obviously, it is specifically built for the Sonoran Desert in every possible way, considering it defines the Sonoran Desert. When they are young, they are cradled by larger bushes, like triangle burr sages and palo verdes, and eventually they outgrow them, and a lot of the time outlive them, and rise up to be these towering, beautiful things. They bloom as soon as it starts getting hot out, which in the Phoenix area, that used to be like June, but nowadays it's like the end of April, beginning of May, and they create these fruits, and the fruits are edible, though it's a bit of a challenge to get. I don't recommend trying it, but if you do get your hands on some, they taste pretty dang good, and they've been harvested for thousands of years by the Native Americans in the area. Additionally, I can't talk about the saguaro without talking about the big problem, and that is with the increasing heat island effect of the Phoenix area over recent years, a bunch of saguaros have been dying. And you'll notice that a good amount, perhaps most of the saguaros that are dying untimely deaths, are dying right next to streets and houses and construction areas where roads were built, where tunnels were dug, cables laid, and that's because their root systems were interfered, their immune systems were interfered with, and they cannot breathe whenever the nighttime temperature exceeds 90 degrees for too long, leading them to get a disease called bacterial necrosis, which can cause them to melt from the inside and collapse and die, and it's really tragic. And it is happening more and more to the saguaros in and around the Phoenix area because of that heat island effect. Because, Phoenix is just a lot of exposed concrete and asphalt and roofs, so much reflected light, so much heat that as time goes on and the city is grown and everything is happening, like, it is just becoming more and more difficult to get a human-planted saguaro to survive in the ground. right? Because they're already weakened when they're planted in the ground. Additionally, when they get planted in the ground, you have to be extremely careful because a lot, if not most of the time, when landscapers try to plant the saguaro, they plant them way too deep in the ground. You should be able to see the root flare of the saguaro, preferably. Like, if it doesn't taper as it goes to the ground, if it's just a straight perpendicular column going into the ground, then it was planted too deep in the ground, and especially with the heat island effect, if it's near a house or near a road, stuff like that, that saguaro is most likely not going to last very long. It may seem okay for a while, like a significant while from, like, our view. You know, it could take like 20 years for it to die, but its cause of death will be that it was planted too deep. And a lot of the time, it does not take that long at all. So you have to be extremely careful. Like, I'm going to give the saguaro a 10 out of 10 for being the signifier of the Sonoran Desert, the icon of the Sonoran Desert. But there are so many ways for it to go wrong having it planted. Right? It's best to just keep one. If you have one on your property, just keep it and don't mess with the ground around it. And there is a very high likelihood that if you try to plant one at your house, the landscapers are going to do it wrong. So you have to be extremely careful. Let me know if you want me to review any other plants, and if you have any other questions about saguaros and the difficulties of getting them planted properly, then let me know. The saguaro is an amazing thing, and I would love for them to be successful in the future. But if there's going to be saguaros in the Phoenix area in the future, the landscapers have to plant them correctly. It's extremely important to make sure that they are getting put in the ground correctly. And I know a lot of people don't want to have those ugly support beams in their front yards or whatever, and so they allow the landscapers to plant them too deep in the ground. But you're killing it. So please, I beg of you, even if it means you have to have support beams on them for like multiple years, just do it. Don't suffocate the saguaro. It's already having a tough enough time in the Phoenix area as it is. So let me know what you want me to review next, and see you later. Goodbye.